ended up with an extra pen. Okay, so you guys are ready for action back there? You're ready. Okay, welcome everybody. We're glad to see a full room of people here at the 5th Annual Vibrant Living Expo Ask the Experts panel. My name is Dr. Rick Dina. I will be the moderator, and we have many distinguished panel members, Victoris Kovinskis, Dr. Doug Grahem, Dr. Karen Dina, Brian Clement, and Dr. Thomas Lodi, who I have yet to meet. Hopefully we'll get a chance to speak later on. And many of you have given us your cards with your questions, and what we're going to do is do our best to get through as many of these questions as we can. So some of them are to everybody on the panel, some of the questions are just to specific people. And for panel members, I want to mention this, that many of us are friends and we know each other, although as the moderator, I'm not here to make friends. I am here to get as many questions answered for the audience members here live, as well as who are watching this streaming on the internet. And I was given a 2-minute countdown timer. So when your section starts, I'm going to start this, and when it beeps, if you of course want to finish your sentence or your thought for a couple of more seconds, that's fine. But for the most part, when this beeps, you are done. And I will facilitate going on to the next panel member or to the next question. Because sometimes we all have so much information to share, 1 or 2 questions can take up the whole time, and people leave disappointed. So we want to facilitate getting as many questions in as possible. Okay, so there are a whole bunch coming in. I've got a book of questions here. So why don't we start out with some good controversy. I see a good controversial one coming in right now. And the question is to all. Oh, and by the way, panel members, if someone has made the main points that you want to make, you're not necessarily obligated to answer every question. But of course, if you had anything relevant to add that would benefit everyone hearing, then by all means, please do answer. So that way we'll keep this whole thing moving. So for this one, I'm going to start with Dr. Is it Lodi? Did I say Lodi? Okay. And the question is to all. Do you supplement B12? You have 2 minutes, Doc.
I supplement B12 with for people that have been vegan for a few years. You know, when people first make the change, there's really no need. You know, the other thing is, you know, I work on every other aspect of health because I'm of the opinion that if we could be restored to health, we would probably have the appropriate microflora in us. I don't know if we can do that in this modern 21st century artificial world we live in. But if I move to Vanuatu, I don't think I'll need B12.
Very good, thank you.
And I supplement 100% of the people on a bacterial form of B12 because we found that 65% of the population at any given time lacks it.
I would agree with everything that has been said so far. My preferred form of B12 is methylcobalamin because that is the human bioactive form of B12.
Wow, everyone's very succinct. Dr. Grahem?
That's one of the questions. You already started my timer and now you're doing that?
No, I didn't.
Good. I didn't want you to forget. The question is, do we supplement B12?
Do you supplement B12?
I find that B12 all by itself is really not an adequate diet, and so I supplement B12 with a great number of fruits and vegetables. Do I use supplements as part of my program? No, I don't use supplements as an integral part of the program. Do I recognize the value in supplementing in specific cases when indicated? Yes. I don't use any prophylactic nutritional supplementation.
Okay, very good. And Victoris, if you'd like to address that.
No, I haven't used supplementation for vitamin B12. By cleansing and detoxifying, you will make the intrinsic factor available, as well as also the microbial cultures will provide more than enough.
Okay, wow, very good. Thank you all for your succinct answers. And if I can figure out how to run my thing here. All right, we have a lot of other excellent questions that I am sorting through. So as long as we're starting with potential controversy, here's another good one. And it simply says fruit/fat with a question mark. So maybe we'll go in a different order. Dr. Graham, would you like to start with that one, a topic you are very passionate about? Or should I start elsewhere and come back to you?
I don't mind.
Okay, very good.
I don't see it as a highly controversial topic. No one on a high-fat diet can succeed also eating a high-sugar diet. That'll never work. Neither sugar nor fat are culprits per se to be avoided. I simply think that it needs to be recognized that there are target zones for all nutrients, and if you go too low in any of those target zones, if you go below the target zone, you're going to run into problems. If you go too high above the target zone, you're going to run into problems. If you're high in fat and high in fruit, you're going to run into problems. High being a relative term, I'm not looking to be high or low, particularly in anything. I'd much rather hit the bullseye.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Graham. And Victoris, would you like to address that, the fruit or fat issue? Or fruit
How could
fat?
I say no to fruit living in Costa Rica? Totally immersed. But the whole issue comes down to levels of cleansing and detoxification. If you got a lot of plaque and mucal material on your blood vessels, it's going to interfere with effective functioning of your insulin transport system. So you're going to have a major challenge. A lot of people have a severely compromised immune system, and they can't monitor or control their yeast proliferation. As a result, fruit is definitely contraindicated. In USA, most of the fruit is acid, with the exception of the melon family, as well as papaya, if you can get it ripe. Then what you're doing is acidifying. Most people who come into a therapy environment, healing environment, trying to heal themselves, they come out of an extremely acidic dietary orientation. As a result, fruit is not really very productive, or in minor levels from the acid alkaline point of view. About 20% of your diet, you could be including it. But like I said, have a good day.
Okay, that was actually, you're okay. Okay, I got to reset this. Dr. Karen, do you wish to address the, move on?
You can get it said.
Well, at Hippocrates, we remove fruits and every form of fructose food, including carrot and beet juice, from everyone's diet who has an illness. Minimal amounts of ripened fruit, as Victoris alluded to. Practically every fruit that we get in Western Europe and North America have been picked unripened, and so are extremely acid. And if we can get ripened fruit for healthy people, maybe up to 15% of their diet can be fruit. As far as fat, what Victoris was alluding to there, how diabetic and low blood sugar conditions occur is fat first. And the smothering of a cell so that the cell cannot uptake any form of glucose, which is one of its primary fuels, allows that sugar then to be in the bloodstream, and we call it a blood sugar condition. So one has to minimize the amount of fat they have and watch things like saturated fats, coconut oils, eating too much of the baby coconut meat and that type of thing.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Lodi.
Yeah, and cancer is a very smart cell. It has upregulated and has a lot of extra insulin receptors. So even when there are problems with getting glucose, cancer seems to have its hands out first and gets fed. So, in those cases, when we have people that come to our center with cancer, we take them off fruit for that period. We use a lot of greens, lemons. I'll use some green apples. We'll use, I can't make the juice unpalatable. It has to be. They have to enjoy it, because if you're not enjoying it and you're looking at it as a victim and it's bitterness, then you've got a lot of neuroendocrine problems that are probably going to damage you. So it's very important to enjoy it. The other thing is that every membrane in our body is fat. Our brains are mostly fat. We need fat. I don't know where this fat problem came from, but fat's very important. It's just the type of fats we need and the ratios. And so I pay a great deal of attention to that, and greens. And once someone is restored to health and their glycemic control is back, then of course fruit was packaged by God, and nose appeal and taste appeal, eye appeal. So it's good food for us. We just we have to be balanced.
Okay, thank you very much. Do my little housekeeping here. Okay, next question. I'm trying to sort through. There was another question that was very similar to that. I think that addressed. Well, here's a good question. This is also related to fats. And did you want to address that, Dr. Kane? Did we skip by you, or did you?
I'm all set.
You're set. Okay. Okay. So here's a question that says, "What about if I don't assimilate fats very well? I don't have my gallbladder." So, any of you want to start with that? Volunteers to start, or should I? Dr. Lodi, do you want to start with that one?
A lot of, unfortunately, in America, a lot of people have lost their gallbladders and their appendices and all sorts of organs. But the liver makes bile. It's not the gallbladder that makes it. So the liver makes it, and there's a lot of bile ducts. And what you're lacking is that the gallbladder serves to store bile so that you can squirt a whole bunch of it at one time. So it's not that you can't have fats, it's just you have to eat it in much smaller amounts, and your body will be able to deal with it.
Okay, very good. And Brian, do you want to continue?
And when you're eating too much, and believe me, it's a minimal amount that one can consume, and all unsaturated fats, you would be taking, the essential fats. Everything exceptional, or more than what you need, ends up going into other organs, creating cardiovascular disease, etc.
Okay, very good. I love these succinct answers. Dr. Karen, do you have anything to add to that?
I think we're pretty well covered on that. I guess just one thing to add, smaller meals with less fat throughout the day is probably one of the best ways to address somebody without a gallbladder. That'll just it'll make digestion much easier.
And I think if I may intervene here as the moderator, so what you mean, they were addressing that you can't eat a lot of fat all at once because you don't have the concentrated bile in the liver, in the gallbladder to deal with it. And what you're saying is if you eat high fiber meals throughout the day, because you don't have a gallbladder to catch the bile coming from the liver, it's constantly leaking into your intestines, and that can be irritating. So by eating high fiber meals throughout the day, you're soaking up that excess bile.
That's correct.
I believe that's what you meant. Okay.
Well,
If I do say so.
I couldn't say that to my wife. She would
Thank
hit me.
It's a good translation.
All right. Well, I got the okay for a good translation. We'll see. I'll find out for real when we get home.
Oh, boy.
And Dr. Graham, would you like to address the no gallbladder issue?
I have some other issues I'd like to address.
Well, we're on gallbladder right now.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that, as everyone has already pointed out, someone with no gallbladder can't handle heavy doses of fat at any given time. I'm a little confused if what we're supposed to do is minimize fat and avoid sugar. I haven't figured out the whole calorie thing. Because even if somebody doesn't have a gallbladder and they're supposed to minimize fat and avoid sugar, I have to admit to being lost at that point. I understand that your brain is made of fat, but that doesn't mean you have to eat fat to make your brain, nor would it mean that eating more fat would make you smarter somehow. That's all.
No, we call people who aren't smart fatheads, and it's an oxymoron.
And Victorious, do you have anything to add to the no gallbladder issue?
Anybody that was foolish enough to let someone remove parts of their body should, first of all, they have a background of high toxic dietary intake and enzymatic exhaustion. I personally would have them on, number one, on enzyme supplementation as a primary issue, so that you would minimize the stress on the liver, and as a result, there will be minimized level of bile production. Bile production is not an automatic thing. It's a response of carrying away toxins out of the liver. So cleansing, detoxification with the support of enzymes would be the direction that I would head. And of course, low fat is the dietary orientation is the one for longevity, though there's a large variance in how much we can consume when it's on a raw food program. Though if your brains are going foggy, it's a good indication you're doing too much fat.
Thank you very much, Victoris. And Brian, you had wanted to make an addition.
Victoris provoked something I'd forgotten before. He and I put together a formula a few years ago for this very concern. It's a very high lipase formula. It's called Melt-Away. And we use this for people who have fat problems, everything from diabetics to overweight, but certainly gallbladder removal or absorption of fats.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And now we will move on to a little bit more of a general question, and maybe we can let the different views express themselves a little bit more. And this question reads, what's your life recipe to live past 100 years old? And would anyone like to volunteer to begin with that?
I would, since I'm getting close to it.
Okay. The eldest member speaks. Okay. That's only fitting.
Primarily, get your iris cleaned up. That says a lot. Get your iris to come back to natural colors, blue or light brown color, depending on yourself. So cleansing and detoxification without melt away. So you cleanse for a week or a month, and then be on a more building program. Go back to cleansing. Until you get yourself to where cleansing and building programs are the same. Moderate eating, exercise, but the attitude is everything. If you don't have an orientation for your future, write your script. What makes your life tick? What makes you enjoy life? And without enjoyment of life, you're not going to get past 70. Never mind, think about 100. What's the good of living if you're not having fun?
And anything else, or are you all set, Victoris?
Okay. There you go. Have a good day.
All righty. And in going in physical order, would you like to go next, Dr. Graham?
Yeah, I actually don't have any guarantees that will guarantee anyone to live to be 100. I would say choose your parents wisely. Keep breathing. Don't die. Those are all imperatives. But in reality, I think you have to have a lot of reasons to live. And then take care of business at home, which basically means eat and live as healthful a lifestyle as you possibly can. You stack the lifestyle cards in your benefit. Unfortunately, this puts us at tremendous greater risk. The fit, healthy people tend to be much more active than the people who stay at home and do nothing and never get out of bed. Hence, we're far more prone to injuries and accidents of all kinds. This is a problem. The fittest guy I've ever met and recently got hit by a bicyclist when he was out running, and now he can't even walk. So there you go. There are no guarantees in that regard. I would say, though, stack the lifestyle cards in your favor, hedge your bets as best you can, and then pick the healthiest parents you can find.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Graham. And Dr. Karen, your life recipe for living 100 years old.
Here's some suggestions. Get enough sleep, which is something that people in the United States don't get enough of these days. The average American sleeps about 6 hours per night, whereas about 30 years ago we were sleeping an average of about 8 hours a night. Regular exercise is important, healthy diet, and emotional poise. Relax whenever you can.
Very good. And Brian?
Well, certainly not to be redundant. She said exactly what I would say. I would add in that you must find your passion and follow it, and find somebody that you can just make love to every day. And you're going to be around, believe me.
And Dr. Lodi.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much is up to us at all. I don't beat my heart, I don't secrete my glands, I don't breathe my lungs. It's all happening to me. And I'm not even sure where my thoughts come from. I don't know if anyone else does either. They just sort of come into our minds. And so I think I see life as a happening. I don't see it as a doing. And it happens to us. And it's almost like sitting in the front row of a roller coaster. And so when I feel blessed is when I'm eating less and I'm exercising more. And I'm having honest, interactions with people. I don't have to lie. I don't find myself lying. That's really important. All those kind of burdens that are really, really impact our psycho-spiritual being. But I also found, if you're healthy and someone cuts you off in traffic, you'll bless them. If you're unhealthy and a fly comes in the room, you'll scream at it. So, anyway, I think it all starts with diet. Eating less and eating pure.
Very good, thank you. Well, I guess I am, based on my reaction to rude drivers, I have some higher levels of health yet to achieve. So
Me too.
I'll be sure to keep working on that. Okay. All right, so this next question says, I am running a lot. I seem to need lots of calories even when I'm not preparing for a marathon. What will give me the best fuel without problems, and such as hyperinsulinemia and hypertriglycerides? Who would like to start with that? Dr. Grahem, could we pick on you for your marathon and athletic experience?
Sure. I work with a lot of marathoners and ultra-marathoners and other types of ultra-athletes, as well as bodybuilders and speed athletes and all types of functional athletes from wide variety of form. What we find is some burn more calories than others. Some definitely go through more fuel than others. It's just a matter of how far they drive their car. A typical marathon runner is running about an extra 120 to 150 miles a week above his normal day. If his normal day calls for 2,500 calories or 2,000 or whatever it calls for, the extra 20 miles to 25 miles a day that they run also requires another 2,000 to 2,500 calories. This puts them on a 5,000 calorie a day diet. If they go on a high-fat diet, they're taking in a lot of fat. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, chronic fatigue, candida issues, a host of problems, liver, kidneys, and everything basically fails. And so we use a diet where fruit predominates for such people. Fruit is the predominating calorie source. Of course, as I have gone on record before, I've always recommended more greens and more vegetables than anybody in the raw food movement from a whole, fresh, ripe, organic state.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Anyone have anything to add for marathon runners? Yes, Brian.
Dr. Kenneth Cooper published a study that surprised and shocked all of us about 15 years ago when he went and looked at all the gold medalists from around the world during a period of time and found that they were commonly dying in their late 40s, early 50s from catastrophic diseases, melanomas, cardiovascular arrest, strokes, embolisms, etc. And he at that point admittedly didn't know very much at all about nutrients. And thank God on his team down there in Texas, in Dallas, he had one fellow that sort of understood nutrition a bit, and they finally looked at it and saw it was free radical damage. And that these people, although now they were 50, they were still exercising as they did at 20, 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day, without enough nutrient load. Now that's a wide cross-section of nutrients that one must take in. Not only carbohydrates, which give you the energy, but the protein undercarriage that literally allows cell reproduction to occur. The red blood cell development, which is tissue mass itself. And one thing we do when we exercise, which is paramount in being healthy, you can't just eat raw food and think you're going to be healthy. You must lift weight, resistant exercise in some way. You must also do aerobic exercise. But in doing both of those exercises, you're going to break down tissue. And so protein's a very, very, very important nutrient for this. There's a lot of schools of thought that say you have to do it after you work out. I just think consistently having a very high protein diet that also affords carbohydrate within it. Things like germinated seeds, which are greens at that point. Germinated beans, which have turned to green. So they give you 2.5, 3 hours worth of sustained carbohydrates with, in many cases, all the 9 essential amino acids that the body requires.
Thank you very much. Any other?
Yes, I would like to add to it. To maximize your nutritional intake, you should be, most people who are involved in lifestyle transformation or whatever style they're in. They're severely enzymatically exhausted. In relationship to wildlife, they have the same enzymatic reserves at last stage of their cycles as they do when they were infants with mammalian studies. So you need to boost your enzymes, which will maximize the pouring out not only calories, but making high bioavailability of amino acids, as well as essential fats out of the nutrients you are taking. People who are doing long distance running stress, they're usually doing it in high pollution environment. They're consuming unbelievable volumes, 2 to 3 times higher than walking activity of cooked inorganic air. This is very treacherous to the immune system. It compromises it increases free radical damage, increases your cellular turnover, and a meltdown of your system. So you need to give further input from not only enzymatic nutrition, but also maximizing your enzymes for regeneration of your system.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to use the rest of my 2 minutes.
Please do.
Just to comment that I agree with Victoris and in some parts with Brian, that the people who are consuming more calories, it's critically more essential for them to make sure that their food source is a higher quality food source. You eat 5,000 calories of junk food a day, you're going to get sick much sooner than the people who only eat 2,500 calories of junk food a day. I mean, much sooner.
Good point. Good point.
I think we're all dealing with not only individuals who are consuming a high-quality diet, but also the fact that you could be consuming high-quality diet, but when you enter into this nutritional program, you could be so severely depleted that you can't digest fats or proteins successfully because of severe enzyme bankruptcy, even though you might overall look and feel relatively healthy. So we need to address that very basic nutrient profile, realkalize, reenzymize. Those are very key driving forces.
Okay, very good. And
Yeah,
Dr. Lodi, you wanted some
real
additions?
quick.
Very fast now. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, humans store carbohydrates in the form of glycogen, which is starch. And so when we first need energy, we break that glycogen down. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes to break down all the glycogen that we can store in an endurance activities. So once that happens, there's only 2 other places. You either have fat or you have muscle to be broken down. You're not going to get any energy out of a bone. So that's basically it. So you need to have adequate fats, and you need it stored to get you going onto an endurance run.
Okay, very good. And Aaron, anything to add to that with athletics?
I think we're set.
And any follow-up, Dr. Graham, on fat reserves, or if you want
if
one
you
more
give
minute?
me a little bit more.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, most of the time in most activities, except at extreme high-end explosive sports, where you're burning almost exclusively sugar, according to the International Olympic Committee at least, their research on this shows that the average athlete working at 70 to 80% of maximum will have between 2 to 3 hours of carbohydrate reserve in the form of glycogen before they begin to utilize blood sugar at any level. So they say basically you can run a marathon at 75-80% of maximum before you will run out of muscle glycogen. I'm not sure where the 20 minutes come from, and I'd love to talk with Dr. Lodi about that. In terms of having sufficient fat, again, at all levels of activity between 10% of maximum and 90% of maximum, you're burning roughly half your calories come from fat, half come from sugar. This means that if you were to run a marathon, 26 miles, 2,600 calories, 1,300 of them would come from fat. This is 1/3 of a pound, or roughly 6 ounces of fat. Is there anybody in the room that doesn't have 6 ounces of fat to spare? I think having adequate fat is a non-issue in even ultra-endurance performance. We all have sufficient fat. That is not the problem. It's fuel that we're looking for. And the one that we don't store, we do not store protein, we do not store carbohydrate. Fat is the only calorie source that we can actually store. The rest we maintain in our cells as functional levels, like you have 10 or 20 gallons in your gas tank, but if I give you an extra 100 gallons, you've got no place to store it in the back seat of your car. You take in an extra 10,000 calories of carbohydrate, you're going to store it as fat.
Okay, Very good. And any other, get the little fat?
I think both of us would make a comment on that because it doesn't fit at least the common profile of anatomy and physiology, what you just said, Doc. Basically, you can store carbohydrates. Where do you think weight comes from? Where do you think muscle comes from? And so basically what you're doing is breaking down the very carbohydrate that's been broken into a cell, a muscle mass, and that's part of what you're working off when you're exercising.
Right. Carbohydrates become fatty acids and they're stored as fat. So people don't eat fat and get fat. They eat carbs. It's, you eat a big pasta meal with a low-fat marinara and lots of low-fat bread, and you'll
Italiano.
and you'll get fat. And you'll get fat. I've got lots of relatives who prove that. So fat does not come from fat. It comes from carbs.
Right.
Okay.
Excuse me, fat does not come from fat? So if you eat fat, you don't get fat, but if you eat carbs, you do get fat?
Right.
I see, okay, thank you.
What he meant to say is that most of it doesn't come from.
Well, I'll jump in as a moderator. I'd say any source of fuel in excess of your caloric needs, whether it's from protein, fat, or carbohydrate, it's all going to turn to excess fat.
I second that motion.
That's my thought on it.
Yeah.
And then you can utilize that fat during athletic activities for fuel, and you need carbohydrates as well. But would we all agree?
Yes, I would agree with you.
There's a definite limit on the amount of fat we can absorb. You'll have floating stools, foul-smelling stools. You will not be able. It depends on you. We were discussing
And if you excess
before
too much carbohydrate, you pee out sugar.
we were talking about bile salts and the ability to absorb fats. So, and if you look at you can reach that maximum very quickly. So you see a lot of sick people have their stools floating. But carbohydrates are turned, just go back to a biochemistry book. That's how it works. I'm not making this up. That's how it works.
It is. It's anatomy.
Yeah, well, and excess protein as well. If you have excess calories in the form of protein, that also turns to fat. Would we all agree that any excess calories can turn to
Well, protein
fat?
hardly ever turns to fat. You need carbohydrates before the protein. That's why, for instance, you could take a protein powder for the rest of your life. You're never going to gain an ounce unless you have carbohydrates that will allow that to convert over to usable muscle mass.
Is that we can't, like you said, we cannot store protein, and the kidneys are a major function of the kidneys to get rid of nitrogenous waste from our body. And we're seeing a lot of renal failure in this country, and the reason we're seeing it is because people are eating way too much protein. So protein, when it's in excess and we haven't been able to urinate it out, it doesn't come out in our feces, it gets stuck in our lymphatics. And when you
that's kind of
have a foreign protein in your lymphatics, and your lymphatics have a low oxygen content, that's a prescription for cancer, and we're seeing a lot of that. Just a woman wearing a bra, the number of hours a woman wears a bra during the day correlates with the risk of breast cancer because she's not bouncing and the lymphatics aren't moving along. So
Next year, my wife has a new book coming out called Killer Clothes that actually talks about the studies that Dr. Lodi is speaking of now.
All right. So a little bit of controversy there, so we'll go on to the next one. How about this? How about
My
would we all
understanding is you
would
eat
we all
excess
agree
calories, you gain weight.
Excess calories, even though we have a little bit of a dispute as to how much of each of those forms converts into fat, I think we'd all agree that excess has unhealthful ramifications that manifest in many different areas. How about that? All right, so-
Excess by definition is a problem.
yeah, I would
The
agree. I
last,
think
the
we'd all
last
agree
statement
with
I'd
that.
like to make on that is the vast majority of people, including raw and living fooders, have too much fat and too much sugar in their diet. That I can agree with. And certainly the modern American, oh my God, let's not even talk about them.
It's even
Not
worse.
on.
All righty, so we'll move on to the next question here, and this may actually tie in. How do we focus on health in a consumer-based society? And the second part of that is there a, quote, do no harm, unquote, formula to raw foodist beginners?
I would like to start. I'll simply say that food does not come in bottle, box, bag, or can. It grows on trees, bushes, and vines, and other suitable plant sources. And if the food on your plate or that you find in your mouth came out of bottle, box, bag, can, you may want to consider minimizing your consumption of such foods.
Excellent. Okay, very good. And anyone else? What would you suggest for a do no harm approach for a new raw foodist?
I would like to make my contribution.
Please do.
And that's true for anybody. It's the basics. It's really coming down to the basics, no matter whether you're a beginner or a senior, and that is eat only when your stomach is empty. I mean, you got to start a chemistry clean, then never eat more than 2 cups, maybe at most 3 cups per meal. The volume of food determines the final outcome. There is no such thing as large volumes of meal with overeating. Third, chew your food very well. And then, of course, a lot of people are negligent of holistic model. Address your internal unpleasant rest in the most positive fashion. And third, exercise and get adequate hydration. That's what is good for anybody, and it's good for beginners.
Okay, thank you very much, Victorious. And this side of the table, Dr. Karen, do you want to? We'll just go right in order here.
It's really important to remember to eat lots of vegetables, especially leafy green vegetables, since they're a really great source of minerals and other various phytonutrients. So really, as far as nutrition goes, green vegetables are really probably some of the best things that you can consume. So that's an important part of a healthy raw diet.
I 100% agree with that, obviously, but on the other hand, I think that what happens when people are coming into a new lifestyle with our inherent insecurities, that we tend to make the food the religion. And that's the number one caution I have for new people. Food is one part of a healthy lifestyle. It's certainly imperative and important that we eat more and more, if not totally raw food if we're ill. At this point, it should be organic. But how we eat that, we have to take into account our addictive nature. Are we now eating the same substances under a new veil? Are we overeating fats? Are we overeating sugars in new forms? And I think that that's what I see commonly happening among most of the people in the raw food field and raw food movement.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Lodi?
I agree with everything.
Okay, very good. So we'll move on. So we all agree whole natural foods, not a bunch of processed packaged ones, and do all the other things that are important to health, not just make food the religion. I think we would all agree with that. Okay, boy, there's so many good questions. It's hard to
I don't know
decide.
about chocolate, though. Chocolate is God.
We can tell by all the laughter here. That was all right, very good. Okay, how about get a little lighter here? Do any of you drink a green smoothie on a daily basis? If not, why not? You want to start down at this end, Dr. Lodi? Do you drink a green smoothie? And if not, why not?
Well, I'm not sure how smooth it is, but I drink green juices every day, at least 3 quarts. And I use dandelion, kale, spinach, broccoli, cucumber, and celery. A little bit of lemon and a couple of green apples, and I drink 3, 4, 5 of those, and I don't usually eat. I eat once a day near the, in the afternoon.
Okay, very good. Brian?
I'm drinking about 2 quarts. A lot of sprouts are in our juice, and we're talking about juice, the both of us, not blending of food. A colleague of mine at the University of Miami did a little work for me and showed that when you blend a food, you kill 85 to 92% of the nutrient factor in it from oxidization through the air that's blown through the blended or masticated form.
That's good reason not to chew your food too fast.
So, Victorious, would you like to continue with this? Do you drink a green smoothie each day? And if so, if you don't, why not?
I'm afraid one of those foolish young men who ends up doing some blending, but I try to use on-off so it's not continuous ongoing spin. A little pre-chopping is good. So I do enjoy green soup, as one would say. As a matter of fact, I've been having it here 3 times a day with Sherry and Dan is offering. So I And also, I've been drinking green juices. I kind of strongly support any kind of greens into your system, as long as they don't look green and haven't turned wilted brown color from too much blending and oxidation, that I'm very strongly endorse that position. But I think green is a good direction to go, and it's also by doing liquid or some pre-blended, pre-chewing, especially individuals who have very poor dental makeup, and many of us do. This is going to be extremely helpful and much more beneficial than not having them grinded to its best, lowest possible grade quality for digestion and absorption. So I do believe in, I consume about 2 quarts of green liquids, mostly in juices per day, and then 1 meal per day.
Okay, very good. Dr. Graham, do you have a green smoothie daily? And if not, why not?
Actually, I almost never drink anything ever. It's a rare occurrence for me to drink anything ever. Every once in a great while, you might find me drinking a sip of water here or there. But typically, I almost never drink anything. I much prefer to eat my food as is, as found. I don't think God goofed or whoever it was that grew the stuff. I just eat it as is. I think it's pretty near perfect as is. I would like to say about the chewing thing, though, that I'm not a big fan of chewing. Most food does not require chewing. Fruit crushes in my mouth between my tongue and a bite, and it's just kind of liquid right then and there. So I think I'm minimizing my oxidative losses by chewing almost not at all. As far as the loss due to oxidation, though, I'm confused because last I checked, since fiber is a nutrient, and none of that is lost when you blend, and water is a nutrient, and none of that is lost when you blend, and protein and fat and carbs are nutrients, and as far as I know, none of that is removed via the blending process. What a miracle that would be for the people trying to lose weight, huh? I'm really just would love to have clarification. If you mean 85 to 92% of the, in terms of 85 to 95% of the nutrients are, I'm sorry, 85 to 92 are damaged, whereas the other 8% are not damaged, or if you mean 85 to 92% of all nutrients are lost, or certain nutrients are lost at that level, because as far as I can tell, we didn't lose 85% of the water due to oxidation, or the minerals aren't lost due to oxidation, and the
Well, let me
do this. Let me let Brian follow up, and then we'll ask Karen the question.
Let me bring you up to speed how an oxidation test would be done at a university. What they do is they check the value of nutrients that would be in the food before you massacate it in a blender. They then would come back after 2 minutes of blending. That was the watershed. And by the way, the faster, more sophisticated, more expensive blenders were towards 92%, where the slower, less expensive, $29 blenders were 85%. They value the food before it's blended. They then test the same amount by ounce, I guess, and find how much nutrient load is left in there. And it's approximately 8%. Grant you that fiber is a nutrient, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about proteins, vitamins, minerals, trace minerals, essential fatty acids. These are the values that they're checking. Not water, which isn't considered a common nutrient, although I write about it as one of the most important nutrients, air and water second. So that's how they value those things in oxidation testing.
Yes, I'm familiar with oxidation testing. Thank you.
Yes, I'm not either. So, Dr. Karen, do you drink a green smoothie on a daily basis? If not, why not? Getting back to that topic.
I have to say, I really love green juice. So I have green juice a couple times a week. I'd like to have it every day, but it doesn't always work out that I can have it every day. I do like to make green smoothies once in a while. Lately, I have been blending greens along with various vegetables, making like a blended salad, and that tastes pretty good. I do have to say, put it in the Vitamix, and it works pretty well. I have noticed, though, that there are oxidation bubbles on the top, after I have blended it. So that is one thing that I can tell from just looking at it. One thing I am going to look into myself is the phenomenon of oxidation after blending. I've been looking on PubMed for quite some time. I haven't found anything yet, and I hope to, because this is a big question that we get from people. And I'd be interested in knowing more about your research. Sounds rather fascinating.
Okay, so I think we're covered with that, and let's see. Where do I pick? No, we have just probably time for one question left. Better make sure it's a good one. Boy, there's so many good ones here.
Keep going.
All right, here's a good controversial one, potentially. What do you think of cooked grains, such as rice and quinoa? Anyone like to start with that?
Go ahead.
Well, wait a minute. You wrote a book on it, so you might as well start on it.
I wrote the book on it, the first book on grains. I think that cooked grains have virtually all of the same problems as raw grains do, plus those inherent in the cooking process.
So you're not a fan?
I'm not a fan of the consumption of any complex carbohydrates.
Got it.
Okay. I'm very much in favor of the consumption of all carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, especially from grains, from the point of view that it is extremely high density nutrient profile. In a cooked form, it gets not only disorganized, but the enzymes knocked out. In a sprouted grain, you have a high bioavailability and predigestion of both the starch as well as the protein, fats, as well as an exaggerated growth of essential nutrients, especially vitamin E, and especially for reproductive and regeneration of the energy matrix of the individual sprouted grains cannot be beatable. Most people, as far as cooked grains and starch challenge, are exhausted by the time they hit mid-30s, according to Dr. Sumner, who is an enzymologist of amylase enzymes. As a result, they don't digest it. It turns acid, sour, and that's where you get to reach for rolates, Tums, and acid reflux diseases, all related not to excess hydrochloric acid, but souring and acidification associated with starches. So watch your starches. If you're very acid, you can't really successfully digest any of the starches, because starches don't digest in an acid environment. A lot of people are due to acidic because of the kind of dietary habits they enter. So it's not a food that I would say as part of a cleansing program, but it certainly is a good food part of a building program.
Okay, thank you. And why don't we just go down the line? Karen, do you think, what do you think about cooked grains?
Could I answer last?
Why don't you just go in order? That would be great.
Okay. I have to say, I actually do consume cooked grains. I consume steamed brown rice. I have steamed quinoa from time to time, and it actually works very well for me. I haven't noticed any acid indigestion or anything like that, but I think the consumption of grains really has everything to do with the individual person. I think they work well for some people. I think for others it may be challenging. It may be especially challenging with certain grains for people who are gluten sensitive. So in my opinion, it just really has to do with the person themselves.
And the sensitivity and the individualism comes from whether you have the amylase for digestion or not. Take supplementation of amylase or whole enzymatic supplement, and you will see both your gluten intolerance will disappear and also your ability to digest successfully grains if you have some sort of a challenge. Not that it's an essential, but sprouted grains, you will see a dramatic increase of youthfulness.
Can I answer that?
Please go.
I'm just, Victorious, maybe you could clarify something. How could amylase work with gluten when gluten is a combination of two proteins?
You never find amylase in an isolated. When you take any kind of enzyme supplement, it has protease and lipase, and the protease is what's going to help to bring up, and they've got lots of research published where they're treating successfully celiac disorder disease, which is gluten intolerance, by a full spectrum of enzyme supplementation and the regeneration of the protease levels, so now you're in a position to handle gluten.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not here to pick on Victoris either, but how does what you just said, which was I'm in favor of the consumption of all complex carbohydrates but don't eat starches, how does that work exactly?
I don't understand the question.
What you just said in your, sorry, we could go back and quote it on the tape if you want, but it said, you started by saying, I'm in favor of the consumption of all complex carbohydrates, but don't eat starches, is how you finished. I'm just wondering how that works.
Yeah, that's why I'm totally for ingestion of sprouted grains, which is primarily rich in enzymatic amylase, which supports the digestion of whatever pre-digested starches that you have. You'll have at different levels of digestion due to enzymatic activity. That's what germination process is all about.
Nice.
You initiate enzymes that digest the starches that are in the grains.
Seeing we're getting the hook, I'm
thanks for
just going to
clarifying.
jump in there and let the other two panel members answer this question, and then that'll wrap us up.
Going back to my theme that food should not become a religion for anyone, when I joined the staff of Hippocrates in the mid-'70s, it was at that phase. You know, either you were part of the good boy club and you ate all raw food or you didn't. And what we realized is if you germinated a higher protein grain like a quinoa, a millet, a teff, an amaranth, and then cooked it slightly and told people, even after you're well from a major disease, eventually you can eat a small amount of cooked food. This is work we did at Tufts University back in Boston in the late 70s, early 80s. It really opens up a new world to people, even if they never do it, to give them an opportunity to say, okay, it doesn't have to be 100% raw the rest of my life. I'm not in some kind of a cult activity here. So I'm a person who does suggest the sprouting and light cooking of these type of higher protein carbohydrate grains to make life reasonable for people.
Okay, and Dr. Lodi?
Yeah,
I'll finish with you.
That's very true. You can't feel deprived. If you feel deprived, you know, it's going to eat you up. It's very important. But the best thing I would say about cooked grains is the way they taste. That's the best thing, is the way they taste. And they also, you know, you have a lot of endorphin secretion. They make you feel, you know, fuzzy and warm and go to sleep. And that kind of tells you, it's sort of, I think they just kind of shut everything off. You know, when you're playing pinball and all of a sudden it goes tilt, that's what cooked grains do. So if they were to be used as a little bit of a reward here and there throughout your life to get you from one step to the next, they're good. But I don't think they should be a regular part of anyone's
Especially the pasta.
Especially.
And I do want to add this whole food combining concept. The most critical place in dietary intake is if you are consuming any form of grain, whether cooked or sprouted grain, is never have a tomato or anything acidy or fruity within such a meal, because you're going to be sorry for that. Indigestion will follow.
So we are going to end up, as usual, there's much to agree upon, a few areas of debate. I unfortunately got the hook several minutes ago, so we will not be able to continue, but we hope you all got some useful information.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.